Well, it's an honor to be here. I was sitting in a chair right over there exactly a year ago today, and I heard something on stage that completely blew my mind. We've heard it repeated here a number of times as well, but I heard it for the first time last year, and it was this. Imagine discovering a new island with 1 billion PhDs who will work all around the clock for just the cost of energy. And that was an unbelievable thought that we're actually close to that. Like that will probably happen this decade, that will have that kind of computing power available to us. So that really shocked me to the core and made me think back to all the other disruptions I've seen in my lifetime. And I remember the very first one, when I saw my first IBM PC. I think this new disruption is going to dwarf anything else we've ever seen. But I remember the IBM PC came out in the actual month I graduated from college in 1981, and I went down to my computer land in Pasadena and bought this $5,000 machine with 2 floppy drives, 128K of RAM, no hard disk hadn't been invented yet. And it was still absolutely incredible, and I felt, this is democratizing computation for the world, and it did. And that was a powerful moment. Then Netscape in 1994. I remember when I first started playing with the browser and saw how you could connect with people all across the planet. And the democratization of information was unbelievable. And then the iPhone, democratization of communication, connecting everybody on the planet. But ChatGPT in 2022 was another thing that I think will never make the world the same post that moment. I feel that November of 2022 is going to be looked back on as a tipping point in all of human history. And the reason I feel this is, as Peter has said many times at the conference, huge disruptive changes occur when the cost of something approaches zero. With the internet, the cost of distribution approached zero, and that caused massive change. With the cloud, the cost of storage approached zero. With generative AI, and AI in general, the cost of accessing and even creating knowledge is approaching zero. That is why this is so transformative, because it actually affects all of knowledge, not just a narrow area as some of these other revolutions. And we're seeing huge investment. I think all of you know this. It's been talked about at the conference, but this number was staggering to me. Last year, investment was made of $1 billion in AI every single day. That's the pace of this revolution. So this is being adopted faster than anything else. We saw the adoption of the internet. We saw the adoption of personal computers. This is actually much faster than that. And in fact, in the last 4 years, 1% of all R&D dollars were spent on AI 4 years ago. It's now 20%. 20% of every R&D dollar spent on the planet is on AI. So it's really incredible how fast this is going. And I feel like 2025 feels like the internet in 1995 magnified dramatically. It feels much bigger. And Vinod, who will be here later today, has said 80% of jobs were replaced in 10 years. I actually think he might shorten that time frame from less than 10 years. So there's really an incredible transformation that's happening right now. Here are some of the ways that I think AI will impact things going forward. It's broken down into 3 categories by Roy Bahat from Bloomberg Beta. The first is looms. Looms automate a person's work. So think of AI taking something and automating a process that you did before with humans. Another category of AI would be slide rules, AI to make a human faster. But the last category, cranes, extend what a person can do to do something that a human couldn't even do before. Think about how a crane allows people to make buildings and structures and lift things that a single human couldn't do. AI will do the same thing. We've seen all of these things, examples of all of these, but that's the next level of taking these foundational models and building each of these 3 types of applications on top of it. Think about how in your business you can take one of these 3 things, or all 3 of them, and make a dramatic difference. So I had a few personal aha moments with AI. I'd be curious to hear what yours are. The first, of course, was seeing ChatGPT in November of 2022. Some people called it a stochastic parrot because it was just predicting the next word, but it was a pretty impressive stochastic parrot. But of course, AlphaFold predicting every protein was another incredible moment. That showed that it was way more powerful than just predicting the next word. But I had another one that was really incredible. Let me explain this one to you. In December of last year, I was giving a talk, and I was rehearsing it. And I had recorded it with Otter, so I had a transcript of it, and I was asking my colleagues for ideas on how to improve it. And they were giving me a few suggestions, but then since I had the transcript, I got this idea to take the entire transcript and just paste it into ChatGPT and say, can you give me 10 suggestions for how to make this talk more effective? I want 10 specific suggestions. It thought for about 5 seconds and came back with 10 incredible suggestions. I'm just going to tell you about the first 2 of them, but this is what blew my mind. It said, you've established the context, frame the problem more clearly, and move it up further in your presentation. You take too long to get to the point. Okay, that completely blew my mind. How did it figure that out? This was a talk that was never posted to the internet before. I had never given the talk yet, so there was no way ChatGPT had this to look at. So this was more than just predicting the next word. This was something unbelievable. What it actually spoke to me was that predicting the next word at huge scale leads to an emergence of something new beyond what I could comprehend, and that was really incredible. This was actually repeated by Stephen Johnson. You heard this mentioned yesterday from Google. Stephen Johnson was working on Notebook LM, and he took the manuscript of a book. He posted this on Twitter. It was almost right after I had done the same thing, and I was blown away to see other people are seeing this. He took the manuscript of a book that had not yet been published, so again, ChatGPT didn't have it, no one had ever seen this before, and he asked the question, can you identify the places in this book where I deliberately withheld information to build suspense in the reader? And 5 seconds later, it came back and said, here are the 4 places where you withheld information. Unbelievable. Again, how does that emerge from predicting the next word? So what happens when you take this huge neural net, and basically neural nets have worked. Neural nets are these simple things that, here's a 5-layer neural net, that start out by giving something inputs, giving it outputs, and having it train on those weightings. A simple 5-layer neural net can't do very much, and that's why maybe people abandoned neural nets a long time ago, because they really weren't that powerful. But at scale, they do something that's just extraordinary. And to take a look at where neural nets stand in biology, a 5 to 10 layer neural net is what a fruit fly has. 100 to 200 layer neural net is what a rat has. And we have about 1,000 layer neural nets. And this is an exact way to characterize the brain, but approximately. And ChatGPT has a 126 layer neural net. So it's exponentially larger than that 5-layer neural net that I saw you with billions and trillions of connections. And maybe that's why some of this incredible thing emerges when you make these things big. Well, just imagine what happens as they get even bigger. So I actually think because of that power, AI might actually be underhyped, both the good and the bad. The good, I think, is going to be extremely positive, but the bad could be pretty bad, and we've talked a lot about that, about safety. But I think we'll have AI that's smarter than Nobel Prize winners, like everybody's talking about. I think we'll have AI, and we're already seeing it now, that can work with your mouse, your keyboard, and your screen. And I think we'll have large AI data centers that are basically like a country of geniuses. All those things that people are predicting, we'll probably see much sooner than we expect. But every new disruptive innovation brings greatness and unintended consequences. So I just took an example here. Radio brought the unbelievable benefit of instant mass communication, but it also brought some unintended negative consequences of propaganda tool for World War II. And nuclear power, unbelievable positive. Unlimited green energy, low cost, high energy source, but nuclear accidents, nuclear weapons, and even take a look at fossil fuels, which have unbelievably lifted people out of poverty and given warmth, convenience, travel. Many of us use fossil fuels to get here. But of course, it's led to wars over energy resources, climate change, weather disasters, the fires we had here in Los Angeles, and beyond. So every new technology is going to bring positives and negatives. I feel it's how do we maximize the positive, minimize the negative, and that's what got me thinking the following way. I made up a table of some of the AI consequences in these 3 categories. What are some of the positives? Well, we've all heard about those. Education and cures and scientific advances. What are some of the negatives? Copyright theft, misinformation, bias, weapons, job loss, a lot of negatives. And then there's unintended consequences, the rogue AI, the CO2 that is released maybe from data centers that are powering these huge centers of geniuses. So I can't believe that when Google invented the transformer in 2017, they ever thought this could be a contribution to climate change, that this is going to require so much electricity that maybe we'll have a problem with CO2 emissions. That was an unintended consequence of that paper when that was first invented. There'll be many, many other unintended consequences that I can't predict. But here's the way I looked at it. Many people are working on the positives because there's a lot of money to be made there. I would love to focus on some of the negatives and unintended and see if there's ways to cause things to mitigate those. Maybe businesses that could mitigate those, maybe policies, maybe movements that can mitigate those. So I picked 3 that I can make a difference on, and I want to talk to you about those 3 today. The 3 that I'm working on are copyright theft, content monetization, because that's getting harder and harder in this age of AI answers, and CO2 from energy. The energy released from AI data centers could cause a serious problem. So I'm going to spend a few minutes on each of these 3. The first one, copyright theft. Well, generative AI today is really incredible. It's powerful, it's unstoppable, but I feel it's stealing content from creators. The AI answer engines are just lifting copyrighted materials and using it in their output and not giving anything back. So I started this company called ProRata to measure that content, attribute it, and share revenue 50-50 with creators. I think that's really important to try and make democracy survive, but also content creators survive. So this is a funny tweet that I saw from Ariel Dumas. She said, "I have been told to stop stealing muffins from the bakery. Unfortunately, it's the only way I can keep my lucrative muffin stand in business. Everyone is fine with this." And that was pretty funny. And then she goes on to say, "Many large investors are interested in my muffin stand because I have promised them the magic of muffins without costly ovens or workers. This, you see, is why I must keep stealing the muffins." So it's hysterical that she says that, but that's actually pretty close to what some of the AI companies are saying. Mustafa at Microsoft says, "Oh, we can use everything on the internet for free to train our models." And Sam has been complaining, we have to use the copyrighted models for free, otherwise we can't afford to run our business. So that's kind of ridiculous, because in every business where content is being used, created by someone else, revenue is shared. So that's led to these lawsuits. And I really feel that it is very clear that they've broken copyright laws, but the lawsuits, we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But even the workers from OpenAI who have left say they took copyrighted materials and used it in the training. But like I said, revenue is shared in almost every other area. Spotify shares revenue, YouTube shares revenue, Google Play, Apple Store share revenue. They share revenue based on either the streams or the downloads or the views. So it's very fair to do that, and it's been done not only in digital media, but it's also been done offline. So Nielsen counts the views on a TV show to share revenue from the advertising, and ASCAP records whether music is played in restaurants or bars and shares revenue that way. So this is a standard, and companies can make it work. And in fact, Spotify took in $16 billion of revenue last year, paid out $12 billion to artists, and is still a $100 billion market cap profitable company. So you can share revenue and still be profitable, contrary to what some of the AI companies are saying. So one of the reasons that they are not sharing revenue is they don't want to. But one of the other reasons they're not sharing revenue is there's not something as easy to count as a download or as a video view. So we set out to figure out how to figure out what percentage of content was used in an answer so that revenue could be shared 50-50. So what that requires is reverse engineering the output to go back and look at the actual content that's in there and figure out, oh, this came from the New York Times, oh, this came from the Financial Times, oh, this came from here in this percentage. So we worked on a system to do that, and you can take a look at it today. At Gist.ai, we worked with a number of partners to take in their content with their explicit permission. We then answer questions from that content, and we break it down and say, like here, 34% came from The Atlantic, 25% came from Time Magazine, 25% came from Fortune, 16% came from The Guardian. That little attribution bar at the top breaks down the content, and then we share revenue 50-50 according to that basis. And we show you the actual sources on the right-hand side. So I want to try and show this as a model that can be copied by others, imitated by others, scaled, so that the entire AI industry does this. And this would address some of this copyright theft. I hope this can make a difference in that way. And the whole goal of this is to really lead to something that is much more fair. In just the last year, we signed 400 publishers, authors, and musicians to this. Some of the authors that we added to this are actually Peter and Tony Robbins, so we'd love to get more authors in the system. But with Universal Music Group, we signed over 200 musicians who all want to make sure that AI respects their rights. They love the idea of AI generating new things. They just think they should be credited when their work is used in that context. So we really hope that that can make a difference. It's ProRata.ai and Gist.ai. Take a look at that, and I'd love your feedback on that. Next area is search. So search has changed dramatically over the last few decades. This is a quick survey of how search has changed. First, in the 1990s, you had very simple traditional index search, and even Yahoo wasn't even an index at first. It was Dave and Jerry's Guide to the Internet. They just made up a list of websites because you could count the number of websites in the hundreds or thousands, so they made up an organized hierarchy of them. But the results quickly became noise as the web grew very large. Then, in 2000, 2001, we invented pay-per-click with GoTo, and Google invented the link strength algorithm. Those two things led to a way better search algorithm, led to way more relevant results, and we basically had a 20-year run of increasing quality of results until recently when, in 2022, AI search showed us an even better way. AI search allows you to ask a question and get a direct answer. You don't even have to go through the links and look for the answer anymore. You just get the answer directly. And I'll show you an example of that. This is a search I did I call it the evolution of search from breadcrumbs to answers. Breadcrumbs meaning a bunch of links that give you clues to where the answer might be, but the answer is just direct. So I asked a question for what are the profit margins of the biggest companies. On the left, at Google, I get a bunch of links. I have to go browsing through all of them to try and discern all those numbers. On the right, I asked ChatGPT. It just gives me a table with a full summary. The answer's right there. This is unbelievable. This is just unbelievably powerful. However, that is based on the back of work of people who worked on those websites to craft those answers, and that's why I think ProRata needs to share the revenue with them. But this is important about how much better search has gotten from this. So what happens? Value is being taken away from websites by this change. This is from Matthew Prince from Cloudflare. Cloudflare has a service that helps companies protect their websites, but it gets in between the crawling of all these AI crawlers and search engines and websites. So Matthew showed this to me in Davos this year, and it was really incredible stats. So I made this slide. 10 years ago, Google crawled your page 2 times for every visitor they delivered. So there was almost one-to-one value exchange between Google crawling your site and delivering something back to you. Not quite 1-to-1, but 2-to-1. Today, that is 6-to-1. So it's gotten 3 times harder to attract traffic to your website over the last 10 years. Why is that? Google's putting more and more sponsored results at the top of the page, which pushes your organic results down. And now with Gemini answers at the top, there's fewer clicks out to your website, so it's 6-to-1. So they're crawling your website 6 times for every visitor they deliver to you. ChatGPT is 250-to-1. They hit your website 250 times for every visitor they send. And Claude at Anthropic is 250,000-to-1. 250,000 times they crawl your website for every visitor they deliver. So this is what's happening on the internet right now, which I think is broken, that is having an unfair value exchange to the AI companies from all the content creators and businesses on the web. So that's what I wanted to try and address. So how to address that? Well, in this new world of goodbye clicks, because there's a zero-click search meaning you just get your answer, what else can you do? How can we help publishers succeed in this age of AI search? Well, back in 1998, when we invented pay-per-click, I really thought that keywords were the best thing you could do. But that was the best thing we could do at the time. Keywords are a very blunt instrument to describe a whole website or a whole advertising opportunity. And GoTo took off like crazy. You heard about this earlier. In 1 year, the company was doing $100 million in revenue. The company went public. Google eventually acquired the patents. Yahoo eventually acquired the company. And I never thought anything would ever be bigger than pay-per-click advertising until today. AI advertising is an even bigger opportunity because now you can actually understand the whole context of a website. So imagine a website like this on the left. This particular one is about daylight savings time on Time magazine. You can read the whole article with an LLM and understand everything about the article. That's way better than a keyword. So today we're introducing a new thing called ProRata Ads that reads the article you're reading or reads the answer from the AI engine and then figures out what ad would be the best thing to be there, absolutely in context. And we can use a large language model to do that now. Again, you never could do that before at scale, and now you can. So what we can do is if you find a 90% or higher contextual match between what you want to market and what the article is saying, then we'll show. And if not, we won't show anything. And that way you always have that high context there. So the goal is to change the keyword advertising to prompt advertising. So imagine this, and this is what you can do today. You go to a website, ProRata Ads. You type in your URL. We read your entire website. We understand your products. We understand your offer. We understand your differentiation. You enter your brand prompt. What are you trying to achieve? What goals, what objectives do you have? You can even upload your whole creative brief, and the LLM will process that, understand it, and then figure out where should you be marketed? What answers should you be in? What websites should you be on? And all of that happens automatically. After you do it, we generate some ads for you. You can scroll through and look at the ads and say, I like this one, I don't like that one. This one I really love, I like to do more like this. And then, after we generate the ad, we show you articles. From the 50 million articles that we've processed, we show you, oh, this one matches 60%, this one matches 70%, this one matches 90%. Would you like to run ads only on a 90% threshold? Okay, set the slider at 90%, and now we'll only look for content around the web and on AI engines that match to that high degree, and then we'll show your content there. And the net result is, let's say there's an article, this is an example of an article on range anxiety with electric vehicles. Well, that article pulls up a car advertisement and creates one about a car that has high range, because that is exactly addressing the problem that is discussed in the article. And then all of a sudden, you get something like this. This is a mock-up of Financial Times. This is an article on range anxiety, but the normal ad that would have been there was about warehouse solutions. And now, in this case, Lucid, who's one of the sponsors of the conference here, could show up on the right conceptually saying, oh, we have a car with 510-mile range. That's exactly what would address range anxiety. So this is all what would happen automatically with the power of LLMs. So we talked about that deep understanding earlier that LLMs have. This can now be applied to advertising as well. And a further thing that can be done, we're excited about this too, is right in an ad, you could have an interactive unit where you can ask a question of the advertiser and we can answer that question from your website. So what I'm really excited about is to see your feedback on how this could help your business. I would love for all of you to give this a try and tell us, how do we craft this to be better so you can get more traffic in this age of declining traffic from zero-click search? That's really my goal, to try and help make that really work out. And that's ProRata Ads, working to help advertisers make more money with AI. And I really hope that it's win-win-win. Here's why I think it's win-win-win. The reader of an article gets something that's relevant to them. The publisher of the website or the answer engine makes more money. The advertiser has more effectiveness because the ROI is higher. So like I said, I'd love you to try this out, and I'd love to get your feedback. All right, the last area. AI's insatiable appetite for energy. Just like I said, in 2017, I don't think anybody could have imagined we would have a problem with electricity 8 years later because AI is taking off and has such huge energy demand. But what do we do about that? Well, energy storage is what's needed because we can make solar power now for so cheap. Solar energy is the cheapest electrons we can make in all of human history because solar panels have come down so much in price over the last 20 years. Pumped hydro is the cheapest energy storage for renewables. The problem is we can't build any more of it. Pumped hydro is done by finding a reservoir at the top of a mountain and a reservoir at the bottom of a mountain, and then pumping the water up the hill during the day when the sun is shining and having the water flow down and turn a turbine to make the power at night. And you certainly can't build pumped hydro in the desert where the sun is because all the water would evaporate. So we set out to build a solution for that, and that solution is to look at all the sunny areas on Earth and say, could we power all these data centers in these sunny areas if we could make cheap enough storage so the data center could run 24 hours a day? So we invented this. It looks like an onion, and it's a system that holds 500 tons of water in the absolute cheapest way possible. It's a bunch of steel cables with a PVC liner, and it looks like this in real life. You can see the steel cables on the left holding that balloon. That holds enough water with no evaporation so you can make the first sealed pumped hydro system. So imagine that you put a bunch of these onions up on top of a mountain, put a bunch of these onions at the bottom, and now all of a sudden you can store energy 24 hours a day with no evaporation, and you can put it wherever the sun is. And we think this is really, thank you. I really hope this can make a big difference to make renewable energy power AI data centers so we don't have any CO2 emissions. And this is my dream of what it would look like. Imagine a desert situation like this. There's 100 onions on top, 100 on bottom. Each one of those onions stores 1 megawatt hour of energy in the weight of the water that gets lowered each day. Here's a close-up of that up on the top, and here's a close-up of it down below. There's the PV field around, generating all the power. There's the data center in the middle. There's the onions holding the water during the day and pumping it up. And you get another benefit, which is you have all this water. It's sealed. You can use the water to cool the data center, and now you don't need chillers for the data center, which saves another 30% of the energy. So really, really powerful way to try and make a renewable data center all combined, all in one location. And I really hope that something like this can be scaled. I really want this to make a difference. And this is a picture of the actual units built. These are in Sardinia, Italy, and we have 2 of these above ground, 2 of these down in a mine. We're pumping the water up and down just to show that the system works, and now we want to build this out in the deserts around the world. So that gives you a few different things I'm working on. As you can see, I love ideas, and that's why I started Idealab. But I want to go back and give you some thoughts that you can apply to your business from my lessons learned at Idealab. So I've been starting businesses since I was 12 years old. I was selling candy at the bus stop in junior high school. I was making things out of wood in wood shop when I got in 7th grade. I sold solar devices in high school. I made speakers to pay my way through college. I started an educational software company after graduating from Caltech. And then in 1995, I had these 12 ideas because the internet was taking off. I told you I saw the Netscape product, and I said, oh, we've got to make things to take advantage of this new distribution. And I was going to figure out which of these 12 ideas to do next. And I decided to do all 12. And the way I decided to do all 12 was, instead of being CEO of all 12, I would build a new thing called Idealab where I could incubate each of them. I could give a CEO for each company the independent money to get it started and then help them grow from the lessons learned I had from running Knowledge Venture and prior businesses. So we built up this system so we could do all of them under one roof and share knowledge between them. And it was the first studio of this kind. We really intended to be a one-year experiment. Here we are doing it almost 30 years later, but it was a one-year experiment, and now it's been copied 1,000 times around the world. I'm so proud that people have taken this model and scaled it because it really is a great method for entrepreneurship. It's got its challenges, but it's got its huge rewards that you can make a big impact. And over the years, we've had 5,000 ideas, and as you've heard, we took from those 5,000, we picked the best 150, turned them into companies. We've had 50 successful IPOs and acquisitions, but we've had 60 failures, and we learned a lot more from the 60 failures. So I want to tell you some lessons I've learned from those that could be applicable to your businesses. So these are the top 5 lessons I've learned. I'm going to spend 1 minute on each of them, and I'll share this presentation with you as well, so you can have all these slides. But the number one thing I learned from all these different companies was that you have to challenge the status quo. You have to be bold in what you're doing. When I look back on the companies that didn't make it of ours versus the ones that did, the bolder the proposition, the better they worked. And one of the reasons is another great quote that I heard. Marketing is a tax on being unremarkable. So if you're really, really remarkable, you don't even have to spend as much on marketing. So making your offer remarkable in itself can really cause pull of your product and your offering. And many, many times we made things that were maybe a little bit too me too or weren't different enough from what was out there to break through the noise. And this great quote from Schopenhauer, all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as self-evident. Well, you have to work very hard to go from ridicule to self-evident. But if you do, you really change the world. You really cause something to happen in the world that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So we love this quote so much, it's on the building when you walk into Idealab. Second one, use naysayers as rocket fuel. So when Coco Gauff won the US Open, she walked to center court, I was watching this, and she said this, and I got chills when she said this because I've lived this so many times. She said, "Thank you to the people who didn't believe in me. To those of you who thought you were putting water on my fire, you were really adding gas to it." And that is so powerful. Actually, I'm getting goosebumps just for saying that again right now. The idea that you could turn naysayers into rocket fuel sounds easy, but it's hard. But if you can do that, that is a superpower. That is really, really important because, of course, if you're pioneering new ground, you're going to have naysayers. So turning that around is very, very valuable. Third lesson, timing. Find great timing. I gave this TED Talk a while ago. It's still relevant now. I found that timing counts for success or failure more than almost anything. So what do I mean when I say timing? Are the other things in the world in place for you to be successful? You can't be way too early and need other things to happen. For example, if Uber had launched 5 years before GPS came out, it wouldn't have worked. You really need to have, if Airbnb had launched before social media had come out, it wouldn't have worked. They couldn't have invented social media or GPS, but they took advantage of that timing. So I urge you to look at your ideas, the change plans you have for your business, and say, is the world ready for this? And are all the things in place for me able to do what I want to do? So this TED Talk is a great one to watch. I go over some of the other details, but finding great timing is really important. Next, iterate like crazy. You never get it exactly right out of the gate. I called it Idealab because I thought it was all about the idea, but it's actually way more important to iterate. I probably should have called it Iterate Lab because the companies that iterated more are the ones that succeeded. You don't want to iterate so much that you're not on your mission anymore, the mission you started your idea with, but you need to iterate enough to what the market really wants. So experimenting is the one thing that you can do as a small company that the big company can't. You can move faster even than Google in your experimentation. Google's an amazing company. I just take that as an example. But you can turn on a dime in a way they can't. They have a huge inertia. So taking advantage of your ability to iterate and experiment and learn, action-producing information is extremely, extremely valuable. And then finally, being persistent. Okay, this sort of ties to some of the other ones, but it's a little bit different. It's knowing this following curve. So the emotional journey of creating anything great starts off with you on a high. Of course, you've got the idea, you're excited, you get the dopamine of having a great new idea. But then when you start working on it, you think it still might be fun, then you start realizing it's harder than I thought. And then finally, you sometimes get, I think you almost always get, to a dark swamp of despair over in the middle. And that dark swamp of despair is natural. It happens all the time. I can tell you with our successes that happen as often as with our failures. It just happens. So knowing that you're in that and knowing that you have to climb out is an important part of using that naysayer thing I said earlier, is being able to have the energy to climb up the other side of the hill. Then when you climb up, of course, after success, and you often read about this in the press, you only hear about what's above that dotted line in the middle, because that's all they ever talk about afterwards. They often don't talk about the dark swamp of despair in the middle. That's the part that I'm most interested in. That's the part that I work with our CEOs on, to understand when they're in it and how they can climb out of it. But I really, really recommend knowing this and living and powering through this. So, in conclusion, it's the best time in history for making a positive impact in the world. You'll have 1 billion PhDs on tap to change the world. I think that the goal for you, and Peter's been talking about this here, is figure out how to use your brain power, augmented by AI, to change the world. And there's thousands of ways we can all make a future positive world with AI. I really want that future positive world to be that final outcome. So my ask of you is, content creators here, sign up for ProRata. Let's share 50% of our revenue with you and try and make that the standard. Try out just.ai and give us some feedback. Try out those ProRata ads. I'd love to work with you and get feedback directly from you to figure out how to make that more effective for your business. Let's build renewable data centers together. And next year here, Peter invited me to do an idea workshop, where we'll have a separate workshop where we get together, talk about ideas, filter them, learn about that process, and hopefully I can share more of my lessons learned with you to try and make you have a better success. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Thank you.